What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here, and today I'm bringing you guys another podcast. Today, guys, it is episode 2, season 1 for the podcast, so I'm really excited to be back. I'm excited for all of you guys to be here. Thanks so much for tuning in to the podcast this week, everyone. So this week we are going to be talking about esports teams ending, as you guys can see from the title of this episode. So we're going to be talking about everything that's been kind of going on when it comes to esports teams ending, and I'm sure some of you have already been aware of this. You know, my very first episode was actually talking about Allegiance ending, and it's crazy. This whole thing's that has kind of now been happening now for the past couple of weeks. And that being said, so we have Allegiance ended, we have Oxygen Supremacy ended. There's just a lot of things happening. A lot of esports teams are ending up like backing out of certain esports titles, which is very interesting in my opinion. Just kind of seeing how this all plays out and how it has been playing out now. It's very interesting because I really did not see this coming in multiple different areas. I mean, obviously, I did not see Allegiance or Oxygen ending anytime soon. I thought Allegiance was going to become one of the bigger teams in all of esports. That's what was my personal opinion. And then when they ended, that was just a massive blow, I feel, to esports. And even Oxygen, the same sort of thing. So for those of you who don't know, I was a member of Team Allegiance. I was one of their lead content creators. And after they ended, which it was crazy to me to think of some of like really what was happening behind the scenes and everything. So what we're going to go ahead and talk about, guys, we're going to talk about some of the causes, the effects of what this has on esports and what all is going to be happening here moving forward for different other teams that are trying to come into the space. Is this like a good thing for other teams to be coming in the space? You look at a team like Major, or you look at a newer team that's coming into space or trying to come into space, and is this a good thing for other teams to be leaving esports because it's creating more opportunity, or is it a bad thing because it's making it so that it's just becoming a little bit more of an exclusive kind of sport where there's just the people at the top, and the ones at the top are making all the money and everybody else is just kind of struggling. So with that being said, we're going to kind of get right into this thing. So for those of you who don't know, obviously Allegiance and Oxygen, both two relatively big esports organizations, ended up just completely ending. And both of them, it seemed like, had similar reasoning for leaving the scene, but it was really like they just ran out of funding for their teams. And this is something where, now is it all, the organization's fault for running out of money, or is it have to do with like certain leagues? Are they, not paying these organizations like what they should be getting paid? Or is it the sponsors, or is it their investors backing out? What is it really at the core of it all? It's one of those things, guys. I mean, obviously, I would be able to give you guys my opinion on, what I think happened with Allegiance and what I think happened with Oxygen. I know some of the things that happened, but I'm not going to go into those things. But at the same time, it's one of those things where with esports and where we're kind of the direction we are heading, it's becoming a lot more of an exclusive thing, and it's becoming more and more difficult to run a team at the highest level of play and in the competitive scene. So when I'm saying that and with saying that, it just seems like a lot of these teams out there are, a lot of the teams, when they're starting off, it doesn't seem like they really necessarily know exactly what they're getting into when it comes to esports. And I think what's really important about any esports organization to really make sure that your team is going to succeed, I think content is a huge thing to obviously help the organization grow. Being super active on YouTube, super active on Twitch. And I'm talking about the team itself here, not the individual parts of the team. I'm talking just the team as a whole needs to be extremely active, but just, the actual team YouTube channel, the team Twitter, the team, Instagram, everything needs to be really working and clicking. Now, there's things that, of course, that can happen that are sometimes completely out of the organization's control. So let's just say, for example, guys, you have your esports team, you end up going to a tournament, you win, let's say you win $1,000, and you're relying on that $1,000 to pay your players. Let's say you're going to pay your players, like let's just say you pay them $100 or something, and of that $1,000, and let's just say that the league that you were in ended up not paying you, and so you're relying on that, and then your players are relying on the money that they're supposed to be receiving, so that they can continue playing, and they're under contract and all these different things. It can be very complicated. Well, if they don't end up paying you, it can screw everything up. And you might wonder, like, how is it legal? Like, how can a league not pay an organization or somewhere along those lines? And it gets very complicated, guys. It is a complicated, situation, because then it's like, are you going to file lawsuits? What really is going to happen? And is that everything that's going on behind the scenes? Is everything, whether it's like the leagues, or is it, investors that are pulling out? So, if you get an investor involved in your team, in your esports organization, sometimes they can make it so that, at any point they can pull out and they can stop giving you money. And a lot of these organizations are relying on that so that they can fund their teams, or they can continue expanding and buying into new games and new esports titles. So it's one of those things where it becomes really tricky, and it's a complicated situation. So I think some of the causes, guys, for this, more recently than not, is I think it has to do with leagues. It might have to do with some investors, may even have to do with sponsorships, as well as just individual core components of teams within the different organizations. I also think that, part of it, guys, is some teams try to grow a little bit too fast. They try to buy, a little bit too many esports, or buy into too many esports titles, because they think that's going to help them grow as an organization, when really I think it's more so. Now, of course, I'm no expert. I haven't been doing this for that long, but I feel like if you buy into one esports title, or even two, or you invest in them, and then you just really focus on those one or two teams or individuals, depending on what esports title you go into, and you just focus on those, and you just focus on trying to make those teams better. And then as they kind of grow, as they get closer to winning championships, or they do win championships, then you can start talking about, kind of expanding onto other esports titles. I think what really is a difficult and tricky thing is really, and of course, all of us want to grow quickly. We all would love to grow quickly and, make it really big in the esports world. But the truth of it is at least from my experience so far, is that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. You can't expect to just become an overnight sensation. You just have to kind of build slowly. It's kind of like that scenario, like Warren Buffett says, get rich slowly. It's like that. It's kind of like, don't expect to make, go from 1,000 followers to 1,000,000 followers in a matter of, a few months. Expect to do that maybe over the course of the next, 5 or 6 years. Don't expect to do it, you take those steps to get, go from 0 to 1, go from A to B. And that's what we're all doing. And I feel like Major is still in that transition of we're trying to get from A to B, or 0 to 1. And I think a lot of other organizations are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to, create what they need in order to become, these big organizations. Now, some of the effects of this, what do I think the effects of, teams like Allegiance, teams like Oxygen leaving the scene? I think that some of the effects are, it could go a couple of ways, and we'll see as time goes on how this is going to kind of play out. I think that a lot of people are looking at it as an opportunity. So, for example, you had for Allegiance, they're sponsored by Fused Focus, they're sponsored by Scuff Gaming, and a few other relatively good sponsors. Well, now that those sponsors are no longer with that organization, it may open up the potential that those sponsors may be looking for another team or two to sponsor. So Scuff Gaming might decide, okay, well, now that Allegiance is now ending and leaving the esports scene, maybe we should look at a couple other new teams that we can sponsor and, to continue growing our brand and, at the same time helping the team grow, a new team grow their brand as well. And obviously you have to have good statistics and all of that, but, I do think that is an opportunity. Now, the thing is, though, is with something like this happening, I feel like it's going to scare away some other potential, investors and such. Like it's just too volatile of an industry to really invest in. And that's where I think that it's a concern, is really that esports, is it sustainable? Is it a sustainable place where an investor can come, they can find this, startup team? Because you kind of think of it as like a business, guys. All these organizations are small businesses, and some of them are bigger than others, obviously, but it's really like a small business and that you're starting. And, and a lot of these investors, they're investing in startup companies. Like, maybe like they feel that, oh, this company is going to be the next Amazon, or they're going to be the next Facebook or something along those lines. And so they invest in them with the belief that they're going to get bigger. Well, that's what a lot of these investors are probably going to start doing with esports teams. They're going to start looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, these other big esports teams are already, have multiple investors. A lot of the equity is taken up. But then you have these smaller teams, and these smaller teams are kind of these up-and-coming teams and organizations. So maybe we'll invest in those. Well, see, when you see a team like Allegiance or Oxygen ending up leaving the scene, I feel like it's going to turn off some investors to wanting to do that, because it just is one of those things. Like, it was almost like everything seemed like it was fine, but really it wasn't. And that's the issue. I think that's a big issue. So I think it's an issue for, when it comes to investors and the sustainability of esports as a whole. So that's kind of that's what I think personally. So there's a little bit of some cause and effect there, guys. I think that, do I think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Like, more so, like, would I say it's better that something like this happened because it opened up more opportunity? I just don't think it is a good thing for esports, guys. I really don't. I don't think it's a good thing for, big organizations. I mean, they're not huge, but they were getting bigger to just end up having to end because of, funding and all of that other stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So it is kind of concerning. That is something that is concerning, because you don't want that to happen. Obviously, you don't want there to be lots of teams end up ending, slowly after this. And that gets me in my next thing, guys, is this ultimatum, this domino effect. Is there a domino effect here that may happen with, these esports teams ending? So you had Allegiance end, then you had Oxygen slowly after that, or shortly after that. Is there going to be a domino effect of other teams that are maybe the lower tier teams or even higher ups, out there? You just never really know. And that's a concerning thing, because you definitely don't want all these teams to kind of start folding at the same time, because then it's going to be so difficult to even get sponsors, get investors involved, because you're just going to see all these teams kind of, crumbling all around the same time, and then it's only going to leave these investors and leave these sponsors with the thought, okay, we're going to stick with the big teams, and then those big teams are going to be the ones that are at the top forever, and then it's going to basically evolve esports to a place where it's like traditional sports. See, here's the thing, guys. The thing that I love about esports, and the reason why I've really wanted to get into esports, was the idea was that anyone that, felt they were good enough, or, put in the time and the effort, could go to tournaments, could have like a completely random team, and they could compete against the highest level players. And if you upset those people, there is that potential of upsets. It's like, the crazy, I thought here is like, oh, Major, this brand new team got these completely random players in the Call of Duty scene, and they just took out Optic Gaming. Now, how crazy would that be if that happened? And that's what I think is the beauty beauty of esports, is that it's almost one of those situations where it's like, it's always like different teams and different players are always rising up to the occasions, and it's like every single game counts, every single round counts, every single map counts. It's just one of those things where I think that's what makes esports so much fun and so exciting, is this idea of having tons of different teams. Yes, you have the big guns at the top. You got your Team Liquid, you got your Evil Geniuses, you got Optic, you got Envious. You got these big teams, but then you got these underdog teams who are always like trying to get up there. You know, you got like Splice. Now Splice is kind of moving into that high tier category, but you know, there's teams that are just really trying to move up those ranks, and I believe Major is going to be there as well, moving up the ranks. But the thing is that I feel that if esports or a lot of these teams fall out all at the same time, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to have the teams at the top, and then everybody else is just going to be minor league teams, you know, not professional teams. And I think that's going to be what is eventually, and it very well could be the future of esports, where there's, you know, you got the major leagues and then you got the minor leagues. And when I say major leagues, I mean when you have the MLG, when you have, you know, UMG and the ESLs and all these different tournaments, they are invite only. So they basically invite certain teams to those tournaments, and then, you know, everybody else is kind of like in, you know, maybe this minor league pool, or they have like a separate league. Like the MLG sets up a secondary kind of season or tournament bracket where it's for the minor leagues, and then those minor leagues can kind of try to work their way up to play against the majors, and so on and so forth. Like, it's going to be this rigorous process. Now, and this is just kind of something that, you know, I'm thinking in my head, guys, that it could go to. It's not that it will. I hope it doesn't. I hope it kind of stays what it is, because this is why esports is growing so much, is because of all these other teams. It's this idea of anybody can, you know, pick up the controller and play against other people, and it's this idea that, you know, if you put in a lot of time and hard work, you can make these dreams kind of come true over a period of time, and sometimes it takes a long time. But it's that idea that somebody who's not maybe really good at traditional sports can be good at something like, you know, esports, or just like video gaming, you know. And that's what I love about esports. I love that about it. I love, you know, how the audience engages with just the different esports. It's a great experience, and it's so it's an exciting time, guys, in esports. But at the same time, there are things that are worrisome, you know, and this is definitely one of them, with teams leaving the scene completely. So with that being said, you know, I think that there is still opportunity, you know, for teams. Now, this is all going to be one of those things. It's all going to be kind of, you know, we can't really foresee what's going to happen, but I think that the future does look bright. And another thought I had was, and you know, I'll probably make multiple episodes about this, guys, but esports and the future of it. You know, I remember watching a video by Optic Hex, and he was talking about how the future of esports, like, you know, with Optic, you know, being based out of Chicago, would it ever get to a point where they were considered the Chicago Optic? Or like, would the actual city want to bring Optic on to represent that city? And then that ends up happening in all other parts of the United States, and then it ends up Optic gets their own stadium built, and then all these different things. And I really thought about these ideas. Now, I don't know if Optic Hex brought up the idea of stadiums, but I will say that that's another thing that I was kind of thinking about in my head, was, would it ever get to a point where the stadiums weren't necessarily like rented out by, you know, ESL and from other, you know, big companies, but instead they were actually built for particular esports teams. Now, the thing is that there's so many esports teams, obviously. So how would it work, and logistically, how would it work, is totally something that we just don't know. It's probably things that they are probably working on if that is something that's happening. And we don't really know if it is. I mean, that's just, obviously, guys, these things we don't know. I mean, the real higher up people in the esports scene obviously are probably or have talked about the idea of stadiums, the idea of ticket sales, the idea of, really creating massive brands all across, the world. So you got the Korean teams, out in Korea. They're probably talking about, what if we had our different, stadiums for these different teams, and then, because you figure so many people go to these tournaments. So the way that I'm looking at it is like Optic, if they were to have now obviously they're moving to Dallas, but let's just say theoretically they stayed in Chicago and they decided, okay, we're going to have this stadium built, but maybe they would partner with the MLG so that the MLG could host events there. And whether Optic was involved in those events or not was, just kind of one of those things. It was almost like Optic would rent out the stadium to the MLG, or vice versa, whatever the case might be. But it's basically like the home of Optic Chicago, or of Chicago Optic, or whatever. It's an interesting concept, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and it's one of those things, like, it sounds really cool in your head or on paper. It sounds like an interesting concept, like, wow, like, that would be so cool if you could have an esports team and then end up, like, having your own stadium. Like, your own stadium, that would be absolutely huge. Like, that's just, it's game changing. It's so innovative and so different. But the question is like, which cities would participate? Would they, it would just be, the logistics of it would be just so massive, and I think it would be an interesting transition for esports. Let's just put it that way, because I think that there's a huge potential that could happen. Whether it's, in the next year or the next 10 years down the road. I mean, we really don't know, guys, where this is going. The thing is that all we know is that it's growing, and it's continuing to grow. Now, the question is where does it hit its cap? And then when does it kind of really find out what it is, or who it is, I guess you could say. Because you look at, like, the NFL, you look at the NBA, you look at the NHL, you look at all these, different traditional sports, hockey, basketball, football. So they're all, as far as like the growth rate of these different, sports and such, I think it's probably each of them may be consistently growing very, very slowly over the years. But I think that they are growing. See, esports, though, is one of those things where it's kind of, you got so many different titles, you got so many different games now that are involved in esports, and it just makes the viewership so massive. I believe personally, guys, and I've believed this for a long time, that esports will be the biggest sport in the world. Bigger than football, bigger than football, bigger than hockey, bigger than basketball, bigger than all of them. Could it be bigger than all of them combined? It's really hard to say, guys, because you have so many different esports titles. I think that the sky is the limit. I think that it's going to be it could be so big. But I think that we, as a community, and, as a part of, just esports and all of that, we need to do our part in really protecting what we appreciate and what we need to do in order to sustain this, like, just esports in general. We really have to, like, be careful, because it's one of those things where, a lot of greed can, maybe become involved in something like esports, a lot of just different things. I mean, I'm just thinking about back, I think it was about 2012, StarCraft, for those of you who don't know, with StarCraft, there was these match fixing games, which basically there were these guys or gamblers who would pay like a StarCraft player to lose a match or to lose just one round or whatever the case might be, and they would pay them a substantial amount of money, and then those gamblers would gamble because they knew that that person was going to lose the round, so they would match fix it and make a lot of money. And then there was people who got caught, and it really, really hurt the esport as a whole. It still has not fully recovered as an esport. StarCraft was moving in such a fantastic direction. I know I'm getting off topic here, but this is just an example. StarCraft was one of the biggest esports, games out there, and it, everything kind of went, to shit on it after these match fixings were being found out about. And then, you had all these sponsors, you had all these investors backing out of the esport because of it. So I think, guys, most importantly, as we grow with esports and as we try to figure out really what esports is, obviously we know it's professional video gaming. It's a culture. It's a movement. We're trying to start a movement with Major. And by the way, I hope you guys join the movement. Get on board with what we are trying to do as an underrated team. We want all of those other people who feel like they're really underappreciated or undervalued in the community. We want you to join our movement. And I think, guys, but it's up to us to really stick to the core values of what esports was built on. It's built on this idea that anyone can do it, because it's not like you're you might not be built like a LeBron James, or you might not be the next Tom Brady. But what you could be is you could be somebody, your own self, and build your own brand for an organization in esports. Whatever game it is that you are passionate about, you can make things happen. You just have to believe it and just work at it consistently. And hard work does pay off, guys. It really does. But yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things, guys. I think that it's up to us to make a difference, to really have our voices be heard, and to echo our vision and our movement into existence. Make these things happen. The things that we want, I think that, voicing them is something that's massive, because I think why esports is what it is because of like fan engagement and because of, just the love of esports. It's one of those things like, you could have someone that you really enjoy listening to. Let's just say, a Casey Neistat, right? So he's a great YouTuber, and he could tweet out something like, hey guys, I'm going to be at this gym and I need someone to help me out with, with spotting me while I'm lifting. And you would have a bunch of people there because they want to get selfies with Casey and stuff. But that's the kind of connection that you have with these guys. Whereas like in a traditional sport, now I know Casey's not involved in esports, but in a traditional sport, LeBron James would never tweet out, hey guys, if you guys want to meet up with me, I'll be working out at this gym and I need some spotters. You would have so many people down there wanting to, like spot, for LeBron James. But see, I think that's the beauty of esports, is you can have somebody like an Optic Hex, or you guys could, have somebody like a Pro Syndicate or a Team Martin, or, whoever, that you really enjoy watching or listening to or following, and those people try to make themselves available to you, and they don't hide who they are ever. So you have a lot of celebrities out there who have to like hide their identity because they don't want to be recognized in public, whereas all these other YouTubers and esports, figures that are out there, they're not hiding their face. They're basically showing who they are, what they look like, and they go out in public without being scared for people to recognize them. And that's what's so open about it. And you get selfies with them. And it's just, the fan engagement is phenomenal. And I feel the same way with YouTube. I think YouTube is another way that, it's just great. It's amazing how well the perception of it is. It's such a cool thing, guys. I absolutely love esports. I love talking about this stuff with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of today's podcast. You know, guys, I'm going to be having the podcast moving forward. I want to get some guest stars on the podcast. I used to do that in the past. But the podcast, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a weekly podcast. I hope you guys, of course, are, following along. I want you guys to let me know in the comment section which, topics you guys want to hear about, from me. Is there anything in particular, or you guys want to hear something, just a random story, or do you guys want to hear, more about in-depth with esports or what I think about a particular situation? Just please let me know in the comment section. It is something that's really important to me. So let me know. And I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about gaming. I will be, coming back next week, guys. Next week we're going to be talking about some pretty big games that might be coming out. I have a whole season ahead for you guys of the podcast, and I'm very excited to continue it. And as I said, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy it. And if you did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe for new, stay positive, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.